All right, guys, in this video, we're going to build a little bit of interaction between the ball and the foot so that the ball bounces off the shoe. But just before I do that, I want to add the ability to pause the game and then restart it. And I'm going to do that by adding two methods. The first one's just a utility method to let me see very easily if the game is paused. So my method is going to be public Boolean, because I want it to be like a true or a false, is the game paused? And I'm just going to call it is paused. And the way I'm going to tell whether or not the game is paused, I think I talked about this in the last video, but if the previous time is -1, then the timer is not running, so the game is paused. Right? Simple as that. That should be a double equal sign. And then I want to make a method that allows me to pause and unpause the game. So it's going to be public void pause. And anytime I call this, if the game is paused, then I want it to start up again. And I'll just do that by going to the game timer and saying start. But if the game is not paused, so otherwise, then what I want to do is have the game stop. Game timer.stop. And this way I should be able to have the game start and stop the animation anytime I want to pause here. Okay, so I just want to edit my go button so that instead of just starting the timer, it calls the pause method and sort of flips things back and forth in between the game running and the game being paused. Okay, so let's just try that out, make sure that that works. And if I hit the go button and then I hit the go button again, game stops, hit the go button again. It shouldn't jump on me. It should start up again nice and smooth. And it does. All right, so now I have a ability to pause the game. Okay, so now you saw the ball just go right past the shoe there again. Don't really want that to happen. Let's work on having the ball bounce off of the shoe. So I'm going to do that as part of the ball physics because I want the ball to bounce. That's kind of ball physics to me. How can I tell when the ball should bounce? If the ball and the foot are in contact with each other, then the ball should bounce off of the foot. So remember, for my sprites, I have an intersect method. So if the ball intersects the foot, then they're touching each other. And what should happen with the ball if the ball and the foot are touching? Well, the direction of the ball should change. Okay, let's take a look back right now. I have the ball's velocity set at 100 pixels per second. So positive 100 makes the ball come down the window. If I want it to change and go back up the window, then I should set the ball's velocity in the y direction to be -100. Okay, let's just check to see if that bounces off the foot. Hit the go. It gets down to the foot and bounced off. Nice. That's what I wanted to have happen. Now the ball's never coming back. Nothing else ever changes the velocity of the ball. So it went down, it hit the shoe, it bounced, it turned around, it's now going up. The velocity never changes from that point, so it's not going to come back down. How can we make it look like the ball is falling because of gravity instead of just moving at one speed down the window? Well, in that case, what we want to do is we want to add on to the velocity in the y direction some amount every time the game updates, right? We want to cause some acceleration. Well, how can I do that? I can say ball, and remember I had an add velocity method that I made for the sprites. So this is what we want that for. We want to be able to add in velocity. How much velocity should I add on? If I just add the same amount every single time, one thing you need to know about the game timer is that you have no guarantee that the same amount of time has passed every time the game timer goes off. It just calls the game timer as fast as the computer can. So the elapsed time might be 1/10 of a second. It might be 12 hundredths of a second. It might be 8 hundredths of a second the next time. So it changes. So if we just added on to the velocity, say 100 every time the timer went off, things would lose their smoothness just a little bit. What's a better idea to do is to say, I want the gravity to be 100 pixels per second, and so I'll just multiply that times the elapsed time as well. Um, I don't know if that's going to be exactly the right amount. We'll see how fast that makes the ball move. And then I can adjust what I want my gravity to be. Should it be 100 pixels per second per second? Should it be 200? Should it be 50? We'll just have to sort of play around and get a number that feels nice. Now, add velocity. I'm supposed to give velocity in the x direction and the y direction, so we won't add anything in the x direction this time. We'll say 0 and just add some stuff in the y direction for gravity. I'm just going to put a comment here that that's what we're doing. Apply some gravity. Make the ball fall down. Okay, so let's test it out. Let's see what 100 looks like. When the ball starts this time, it should speed up and get faster and faster. When it hits the shoe, it'll bounce. It'll be heading up the screen. It'll take about a second to turn around and come back down to the shoe. So let's just see how that works. So you saw that little bit of acceleration, and this time now we're bouncing. Okay, I like this a little bit. I think that the velocity when it hits the shoe and it gets the negative velocity, that needs to be higher because it's not bouncing very high off the shoe. So I'm going to stop that, and let's say not negative 100, but maybe negative, let's see what 300 looks like. And hit go. And that's just about perfect because it goes right up near the top of the screen. Maybe a little bit lower than that, maybe even like 250. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit more code into this because I've seen some weird things happen. Remember I said the updates are not always the exact same amount of time. So the ball could be overlapping the foot because it moved forward off of a tiny, like a tenth of a second. Move forward a tiny bit, it's touching the shoe, so it turns around, and the next time the update happens, it wasn't a whole tenth of a second. It was only, let's say, 8/100ths of a second, and the ball doesn't move far enough back, and so it's still touching the foot. Weird kind of things like that can happen. What I'm going to do to make sure that it doesn't happen is I'm actually going to back the ball up. If the ball is touching the foot, just take a look at the code here. Line 84, move the ball forward. And if it's touching the foot after that move forward, I'm going to back the ball up. And the way I'm going to back it up is to just do another update and update it a negative amount, same amount of time. That way the ball will not be touching the foot, because the last time this ball physics was called, the ball wasn't touching the foot. It only started touching it this particular time. Now the ball's not touching the foot, and I changed its velocity, and that should make the bounce be just a little more consistent. The other thing about it is I'd like the ball to, or the bounce to be a little bit random. So 100 was, negative 100 for a velocity was okay. Negative 250 seems pretty nice. So I'm going to pick a random value for the new velocity, double new velocity. And I'm going to make it between negative 100 and negative 250. So that's a range of 150 times a random number, just to make the game a little bit more interesting. If it always bounces exactly the same, that's maybe not quite so interesting. So 150 times a random number. So I need negative 150. And then I want minus 100. So minimum value is negative 100, or minimum speed is negative 100. Maximum speed, negative 250 pixels per second. So just give it a bit of a randomness to the new velocity. Change that there to use the variable that I just computed. Okay, let's give this a run and see how it works. All right, so not too high of a bounce, and then higher. Just a little bit of randomness added into the game just to make it a little more interesting. A little more realistic too, right? Like, I don't know about you, but when I juggle a soccer ball like this, I mean, I never miss, but it does go, a little higher sometimes, a little lower other times, kind of like that. Now, the other thing that I'm thinking to make the game actually have a bit of a challenge to it is, instead of always bouncing straight up off the foot, let's introduce a little bit of left right movement as well. And so to do that, I'm going to do, okay, let's keep this as new velocity in the y direction. And let's pick a random number for new velocity in the x direction as well. And I'm going to have a range of about, I think about 500 times math.random with a lowest possible value of negative 250. So basically what I'm doing there is I'm picking random numbers between negative 250 and positive 250 to put some x direction to this ball as well. That makes the game a little more, bit of a challenge on it. So new velocity in the x direction, new velocity in the y direction. Notice I switched the method that I'm using to set the velocity, took the extra y off there. So it's just set velocity, x direction, and y direction. Okay, so let's just check out what happens. Ball's going to drop, ball's going to hit the foot, ball bounces. Didn't have too much x. Now it's got some x movement that time. And problem, ball went off the side of the screen. And that ball's not coming back because nothing turns it around. So maybe what I should do in the ball physics as well is just check to make sure that we didn't hit the side of the screen. And if I did hit the side of the screen, turn it around in the x direction. All right, so I'm going to check to see if the ball hits the side of the screen. Well, if ball dot, I can find out what's the x position of the ball. And if the x position of the ball is less than 0, 0 is the left side of the screen. And if the x position is less than 0, it's moved past the edge of the screen. Again, going to back that ball up to make sure that we don't get any kind of weird happening going on there. So just back it up, do the same update, but negative time. And this time, I just need the ball to turn around in the x direction. So set velocity x, and I want it to have the same velocity that it had, but opposite direction. So I'll say negative ball dot get velocity x. And so I check what speed the ball had. Let's say it was going at 100 pixels per second to the left. And by making it negative, that'll change it over to being 100 pixels per second to the right. Okay, so that's the left side of the screen. Now the same thing could happen on the right side of the screen. How can I tell if the ball is in contact with the right side of the screen? So what I would want to do is, I'm going to write this just as a second if statement. Otherwise it gets a little confusing. If ball got get position X, now I want to get position X is the left side of the ball. I want to check the right side of the ball against the right side of the screen. So the right side of the ball would be position X plus ball.get width. I want to make sure that that is not greater than the the game width. The game width is the right-hand side of the screen. Ball position X plus ball width is the right-hand side of the ball. So if the right-hand side of the ball is larger than the right-hand side of the screen, again, I hit the edge of the wall, and now it's time to back the ball up and switch the direction. All right, let's see how that works out. There's the right side of the screen. You saw the bounce. It looked good. There's the left side of the screen. You see the bounce there. That will look good too. All right. Obvious problem that we have now is that I can't move the foot. I can't move the shoe to get under the ball to get the second kick. So it's not going to be much of a keep up game unless I can move that shoe. So in the next video, we're going to start adding in the keyboard stuff so that I can move the shoe to the left and the right using the keyboard.